Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us today. This is one of our first Facebook live streams that we've done as a panel discussion. So as with our other streams, there may be some technical hitches for which I apologise in advance. My name is Tim Savage. I'm the local museums officer at Leicestershire County Council. If you watched our archaeological illustration workshop live streams is what I meant to say there. I was bothering about in the background being a bit of a producer, so I'll be producing today as well as chairing our discussion. I'll give you a bit of context about the Hallaton Treasure and 20 years of Hallaton Treasure, because hopefully everybody has heard of the Hallaton Treasure. It's very exciting, internationally renowned, but unfortunately not everybody will have done. In the year 2000, members of the Hallaton Field Work Group found pieces of some initially unremarkable looking pottery in a field near the village of Hallaton, 16 miles east of Leicester. It was only later when one of the group, Ken Wallace, investigated the field with his metal detector that this astonishing sight began to reveal itself. Over the next few years, the Hallaton Field Work Group excavated the site alongside professional archaeologists from the University of Leicester Archaeological Services. They found more than 5,000 gold and silver Iron Age and Roman coins, silver objects, thousands of pig bones, and a Roman silver-gilt cavalry helmet, all buried at a native hilltop shrine around the time of the Roman invasion of Britain. A Heritage Lottery-funded project was formed. The finds were analysed and conserved by conservators at the British Museum, and then displayed by Leicestershire County Council museums in the purpose-built Hallaton Treasure Gallery at Harborough Museum, Market Harborough, where they can still be seen today. Now, I should say I am in the Hallaton Treasure Gallery at the moment. To reassure you, we are in a COVID secure venue. We have got risk assessments for the activity that's taking place. We're taking lots of safety precautions, so we're not putting ourselves or anybody else at risk. And when I say we, I am talking about a colleague I'm in the building with, but appropriately distanced from. So I will now introduce our rather fantastic panel, all of who have a rather unique connection to the Hallaton Treasure. We're joined by Ken and Hazel Wallace of the Hallaton Field Work Group, who found the first pieces of the Hallaton Treasure. Vicki Score, Director of University of Leicester Archaeological Services and the Hallaton Treasure Site Director. Conservator Marilyn Hockey, formerly of the British Museum, and who was involved in the analysis of the finds. And Helen Sharp, Curator of Archaeology at Leicestershire County Council, and back in the day, Project Officer on the South East Leicestershire Treasure Project. We had also hoped to have been joined by Fleur Shearman. I do apologise, I'm getting tongue twisters all day today. She also played a huge part in the conservation of the treasure at the British Museum, but unfortunately she wasn't able to join us today. So thank you very much to Fleur for everything she did and everything she contributed to the project as well. I'm sure the rest of the panel will be able to talk about what she did. We're aiming for this live stream to be about an hour long, and towards the end of it, you will have the opportunity to ask questions and have them answered by the panel. You can add that as a comment on this live stream or send a message on Facebook Messenger to Harborough Museum, and I'll be checking those. If you do have a question, we'll try and get through as many as we can. We've got some topics we're going to cover before we get to the Q&A section, which we shall move on to now. I think we'll start off by talking about the finding of the Hallaton Treasure, because after all, we are celebrating 20 years since it was initially discovered. And there's lots of stories that come out of finding the Hallaton Treasure, as well as the stories of the treasure itself. We want to talk a bit about the process of being conserved, and also what we don't understand about the treasure, because we've had it for 20 years, but a long part of that has been the excellent work put in by volunteer archaeologists, professionals, conservators, trying to get the treasure into a condition where we can study it safely, using people's expertise to try and put it in a context of what it means to Leicestershire, Harborough, the UK, perhaps even further afield. So we'll get onto all of that. I will stop talking now, and I'm going to ask Ken the first question. And you probably get this a lot, Ken and Hazel. And Vicki can talk about this as well once Ken and Hazel have responded. Please could you tell us what it was like finding the first pieces of the Hallaton Treasure, and did you immediately know you had found something special?
Hello. The first piece of the treasure field was walked because we were wanting a field for normal field walking. We had 2 new members joining us, and we were picking up the usual stuff, pottery. One of our group started picking up pig bones, although at the time I thought they were human rib bones. However, Jen Browning put us right some time later. Whilst picking up these pig bones, I pushed the soil apart on one of the pig bone mounds, and 2 little coins popped out, and they were saucer shaped, not flat disc shaped like medieval hammered coins. And that was the point when I knew that they were Celtic coins, Iron Age coins. I suppose that is the point that the excitement started.
Ken came in one afternoon after he'd revisited the site to check what he'd been finding. I didn't know he'd found coins, and he came in the back door and put a lump of mud in my hand. And when I looked at the lump of mud, it was studded with little edges of little silver coins coming out. And I looked at this lump of mud in my hand and the coins, and I said to him, "Are they Celtic?" And he said, "Yes." And I said, "But there's so many," because I knew that people got really excited if they found 1 or 2 Celtic coins, and there were so many in this lump of mud. And I said to him, "Are they Celtic?" And he said, "Yes." And I said, "But there are so many." And he said, "Yes, and I think there's more." And I just said, "This isn't funny," because it was obviously very serious. And that's when we started keeping the secret, which we kept for over 3 years.
I guess my involvement didn't come to a little bit later when we actually started excavating the site. But I mean, obviously now I'm direct with ULAS, but at the time I was just a field archaeologist. And like most field archaeologists in the UK, I'd never seen an Iron Age coin outside of a museum. And I just remember on the first day of site thinking, well, that's okay, because Ken had found a scatter of coins, and the general consensus was that what he'd found was a single ploughed out hoard, and that we really weren't likely to find anything other than more scattered coins from the hoard. We'd had a geophysical survey done, and that hadn't come up with any features. So we put the first bucket of the JCB in the ground, and literally I think 2 or 3 buckets in, I spotted this little green patch, and I walked over to it and had a look, and I looked and I thought, oh my goodness, there's coins in that. So not wanting to alert the JCB driver, I kind of stood on top of it, or stood just in front of it, and he did another bucket, and there was another one, and another one, and another one, and then I started thinking, what on earth do we do? What on earth do we do? So I sent the JCB driver away to go and look at another area of the site. There were only 3 of us on the site at the time. There was myself, Jen Browning, and Ken, who was doing some metal detecting, and who, I think that was our first day of meeting, Ken, the very first time we'd met. And I called them both over, and I pointed to these little green blobs in the soil and said, I think they're coin hoards. And we all just looked at each other. And at that time, all I could think of was, oh my goodness, what are we going to do now? How do I deal with this? Because it was just very unexpected. And to the point where we even got some bin bags to put over the hoard just to stop people from being able to see them. And actually the JCB driver never even knew we'd found them at the time. He didn't find out till later. But it was a bit of a shock.
It sounds very exciting. I think you've spoken a bit about what the next question explores, and partly it's about how we refer to the treasure and how it was actually found. So in Harborough Museum, we refer to the Hallaton Treasure, which is a collective term, instead of the Hallaton Hoards, which you may expect if you've heard of things like the Staffordshire Hoard. We call it the Hallaton Treasure because it's made up of lots of smaller hoards. And I think personally, I wonder what it was like excavating the site. Was it difficult to make sense of the things you found? And were there any obvious groupings, or was it quite a long process to decide what came from what? Vicki, if you wouldn't mind answering that first, please, and then we can move on to Hazel and Ken.
It was actually quite a long process because having uncovered, I mean, the first trench we put in, I think it was about 10 by 10 meters, so not a huge area, and we uncovered basically the bulk of the hoards in that area. And it was only when we started looking at those that we realized that we'd got features associated with the hoards. First we thought they were furrows, but then we saw they were going the opposite way, and we realized we got a ditch with a butt end, and at that point we realized that we needed to basically extend the trench out in order to make sense of it. You know, once the shock of actually finding coins had sort of sunk in, you know, from my point of view as an archaeologist, I wanted to know, you know, what were they doing there, what are they associated with. So we opened a much larger trench, and then we found the features, and it started, I say make sense, but it started to make geographical sense in that, you know, the coin hoards were part of an enclosure and they sat in an entranceway. In terms of making sense of different groups of objects, the site just continued to surprise us, and every object that turned up was something new and surprising, and we would stand on site and say, what on earth is this? What does this have to do with anything? How does this fit into it? You know, it's completely different to anything else I'd ever done before. And it was, yeah, very, very exciting. But at the same time, quite a lot of responsibility, and actually quite scary at times to make sure that you're actually doing things right, knowing that it was such an important site. I don't know if Hazel and Ken have got anything to add to that.
Site didn't make any sense to me whatsoever for the first couple of weeks. The big concern I remember at the time was to try and locate how many actual mini hoards there were on the site to stop people who do illicit metal detecting. So I suppose the first few days that was my priority, to try and go around, and I think I'm right in saying that there are about 12 or 13 mini hoards. And the other complication was, as the digger driver first did the 10 by 10 meter thing, there were a lot of coins that had obviously been disturbed by past ploughing now in the spoil heap. And then as the trench enlarged to about 20 by 20, there was even more. And spent many a happy day ploughing around the spoil heap, lugging out these beautiful little coins.
My probably most fascinating bit of excavating that I took part in was on the weekend when, as Vicki says, it was a very important site and she was worried that she was doing it properly. There was a sort of inspection going to happen by the great and the good archaeology people, coming to investigate the site and make sure she was doing it properly. And that was on a Sunday, and Vicki was there on the site with all of us on the Saturday, and it was the second dig when a different area had been exposed, and members of the group were all on their hands and knees troweling away at pig skulls that had started to appear. And Vicki needed to go home, and I said, is there anything that you need doing for tomorrow? And Vicki said, could you clear all this up? Well, by saying all this, it was all the heaps of loose earth that people had been taking off the pig skulls. And I thought, well, I'm not going to go all over the site on my hands and knees. So I brought my soft kitchen broom to the site and started sweeping up all the loose earth. And as I did it, it was like a children's magic painting book where you put water on the page and the picture appears. As I was brushing the loose grit and earth off that site, which was quite dry, a pavement of bones appeared, and the whole area was solid pig bones, not just the skulls that people have been excavating, but disjointed bits of leg all over the place. And it was a pavement.
Fantastic, thank you. So a very complex site in its makeup and in trying to excavate it and understand it as well, from what you've said. And as you have said, we've got not only coins, but bones on display in the Hallaton Treasure as part of the different hoards that were found. We've got the fantastic Hallaton helmet and some other displays here at Harborough Museum. Obviously, during the second national lockdown, we are not open at the moment, but when we do reopen in the future, we encourage everybody to book a visit to come and see all of those fantastic finds. We have got so many wonderful things on display here, and I'm going to ask a bit of a silly question. What's your favourite or your most interesting object on display? And I'll start with Ken and Hazel, please.
I'm going to cheat here and pick two favourites, please. Definitely the silver bowl. It had its own exhibition at the Goldsmiths Hall in London a while ago, and they have put it down as the earliest piece of British silversmithing. And I used to teach metal work. I even taught 3C once, and we've made lots of bowls similar to this one, only in copper, and I don't think the bowl was ever finished. It's gone through most of the processes. It's been dished out, I would guess, on a wooden trunk that had a bowl carved into the surface, and the basic disc was beaten into that with a doming mallet, which is pear-shaped, large diameter dome on one end, smaller on the other. It's had blocking hammer work done to it. It hasn't been finely planished, and that's where you use a very, very smooth hammer on a very hard stake to get rid of all your marks that you've put in with the previous process. And the bowl, I think, is about 3/4 finished. I don't know why it was never finished. It's a little bit like the Water Newton bowl. And my other favourite object was a unique coin that had Canoubulin on one side and Colonius on the other side. And I say it was a unique coin, but stupidly we found two others, so we ununiqued it. This coin appears to have two kings on it, one on one side, one on the other. Canoubulin, he was in and around the Colchester area, but it is believed that he did have control and land in the Kent area. And old Dubby, he was mainly from the Kent area. So were these two kings at the same time? One is honouring the other. That is being proposed. The graphics of the coin have never, ever been discussed, as far as I know, by the coin people. The graphics on Canoubulin's coin, he always has an ear of barley, and it's two parallel rows of ears. On this new coin, the barley is 3 rows, and I haven't seen it on any of the other Iron Age coins. Also, the horse on Canoubulin coin, they're always prancing. Yet on this coin, it's a very passive looking horse with just 1 foot slightly raised from the ground, a little bit like the milkman's horse used to rest itself. So they are my two favourite objects.
My favourite object is a very finger-worn Roman coin. When Ken was finding so many coins day after day, we used to wash them in the kitchen sink. Sorry, Marilyn, that's not the best way for conservation. And our kitchen was awash with coins in bowls and sieves and drying on tea towels on the table. And at night we used to go through that previous day's coins. And one night we were going through some coins, and as well as the Celtic coins, there were a really strange mixture of often very worn Roman coins. And we looked up one Roman coin that had a little picture on it of a Roman trireme bristling with lots of oars. And the book that we looked it up in said that it was a coin that had been minted to pay a soldier who fought in 31 BC in the Battle of Actium, and it had been minted especially to pay soldiers who fought in that battle against Antony and Cleopatra. And the idea of that coin starting off with someone who'd fought against Antony and Cleopatra was just unbelievably romantic.
Okay.
So that was my choice.
I'm going to go with something that's probably one of the least known objects, which is a tiny little fragment of a gold bracelet. And the reason I'm going with this is because this was found with later Roman coins, and we think it's part of a later Roman hoard that had been dug into the top of where the pig bones are. And one of the reasons why I like this little bit is that all across this site, it's absolutely full of Roman archaeology, absolutely heaving. When we did the geophysical survey, when we did the initial trial trenching, Roman archaeology everywhere, except they very specifically avoided the area of the shrine. And it's fairly obvious that this was a deliberate avoidance. So after the shrine had ended in the 1st century AD, the Romans were there, they were settling there, but they very carefully avoided this area, almost as if they knew what had been there and it was taboo and nobody was allowed to build on it. However, at some point in the sort of 2nd to 4th century, somebody had known enough about this site, had known enough about what went on there to actually go and bury another little hoard in this area as their own sort of, presumably some kind of personal dedication to a god or whatever. And I just think that's a really nice little insight into how sort of the knowledge is kept through the centuries, even though the shrine's no longer in use, and knowledge of it is still there. Okay.
Thank you very much. Helen, would you like to choose yours next?
Sorry about that. Yeah, I started working with the Hallaton Treasure in 2008, mainly putting all of the 5,296 coins onto our museum's database. So I got to know the coins very well. They're like my little babies. So I'm really geeky in that I know what each coin's number is, if it's one that stands out. Coin 222 is one of my favorites. So the thing about Iron Age coins is that they have these beautiful horse designs on the reverse and kind of an abstract wreath design on the other. But very often, like 90% of the time, the people who were striking those coins didn't manage to get the whole of the design on the tiny coin. I mean, they are absolutely tiny. I'll just flick back to show you how small they are. So they're the biggest Iron Age coins are only about the size of a penny, the big gold ones, and the smaller silver ones are, even smaller than that. So yeah, the design doesn't always get all on your coin blank. 222 is the second coin here. I'll just point to it. This one. Oh, sorry, no, not that one. Go back. So this is 222, and I like that because you can see all of the horse and pretty much all of the inscriptions. So that's one of my favourites. And I also like a lovely little coin that was made by another tribe. So most of the coins from Hallaton are the local Corriel-Tavy tribe, probably produced in either Lincolnshire or Leicestershire. But we do have coins from all of the other Iron Age tribes in Britain, except the Canty, who are in Kent, I think. So I like this lovely little coin, which is from the western area, Dubunny, as it used to be known as. So kind of West Midlands area, which is this little one here. Oh, sorry, I think I'm messing up. I can't talk and do PowerPoint at the same time. But the little coin on the bottom right, it's a coin produced by, we assume, a leader called Ann Ted. But I like it in the fact that part of the inscription is missing, so it just says Ted. So I like it. It's quite cute, little Ted. So that's one of my favourites too.
That's lovely. I didn't think we were going to be encountering a Ted today, so that's a nice surprise. And Marilyn, I'm sorry we haven't spoken to you yet, but now is your chance to tell us what your favourite or most is.
Well, I'm going to cheat a little bit because I'm going to be like Ken. I've got two little favourites. One is the obvious one, which for me obviously is the helmet. But just before I go on to that, I think we saw two little blue glass eyes in an early slide from Helen, and they've always intrigued me. And they're lovely little things. And they came with a packet of tiny flakes of gold leaf. And I have no idea, we have no real idea what, I don't think, Vicki might put me right there, they are on the bottom in the middle, of what they come from, because I'm assuming it was some form of wooden figure, perhaps covered in gold leaf, with these two lovely blue eyes. I cleaned them up, but that's as far as we could go. There was no idea what they might be. But my involvement with the Hallaton Treasure started right at the beginning, really, 2001, because the British Museum, I've been working at the British Museum for over 25 years at that point, and we had a responsibility to deal with treasure under the Treasure Act, so that anything that anybody found, and this includes on archaeological sites, that was, broadly speaking, gold, silver, over 300 years old, deliberately buried. Under the law, that had to be brought to the museum to be examined and reported on, and then an inquest follows to decide if it's treasure or not. If it's treasure, which was the case with Hallaton, it has to be valued, and the finder and the landowner paid the amount. If a museum wants to buy it, which it did in this case, Leicestershire County Council wanted to acquire this. So we had the task of cleaning all the coins and identifying them, reporting on them, and that was done by my colleague Ian Lyons in the Coins and Medals department. But my section, the metal section in conservation at the British Museum, had to look at all the coins, clean them, and have them reported on. And in 2001, the helmet arrived as well. So this arrived in a big block that you can see there, big plaster block, and another block from alongside it, which were lifted on site by Graham Morgan at the University of Leicester and brought to the museum to be examined for the purposes of the Treasure Act. So the phase one of the conservation work took about 3 years, till 2003. And I had to dig out this soil block and discover what was inside it, and get out all the coins and the other objects in there. And it was just so exciting. There was a new discovery every day, really, as we worked our way through this. And to have such a fantastic object at the end, after all this exciting work, which happened in the second phase. This was the picture you see in the bottom left there is the point I got to after the first phase one, just exposing all the objects that we could so that the coroner could decide whether they were treasure, and the treasure valuation committee could decide what they were all worth, which is a terrifically difficult job, of course. But it was a bit of a scary prospect when we came to do the rest of the work, but just endlessly exciting. This was the picture on the left is when we got inside the helmet itself, and you see there's another cheek piece buried inside there. In the end, we found 7 cheek pieces for helmets, only 2 of which actually we discovered later belonged to the helmet itself. And something like 700 coins, 400 in this block, more in the other block. There's a stack of cheek pieces. There was bone and little bits of gold and silver, packages of silver, and of course this amazing decorated cheek piece, which is covered in silver and gilded in part. It was just fantastic. And at the beginning, we had no idea at all whether we'd be able to get an object out of it whatsoever. Basically, there were thousands of fragments, from tiny little thumbnail-sized pieces, crumbs, up to big pieces. And it took a little while, took another 3 years to get all of this out, joined up and put together. And we ended up with this amazing object, which forms part of the fantastic exhibition at Harborough Museum. It was a highlight of my career, I think.
Thank you, everyone. I think all of those choices are inspiring in their own different ways. I can completely imagine. I think for me, just being able to work with Helen, our Curator for Archaeology, to do conservation maintenance on these objects is a massive highlight for me. It's one of those things when you're a kid, you're going around places like the British Museum or your local museum, and you see things behind wonderful cases and you see people taking things behind the curtains. You think, oh, I wonder what that's like. So to get to do it now is really exciting. You've spoken a little bit about what the next question covers, which is about the conservation of all of the material that was excavated. It took many years, and I do remember going down to see some of the cheek pieces last year, I think with Helen Sharp, at the British Museum at the end of their conservation. So it really has taken lots and lots of painstaking, careful work, not only to excavate the objects, but to conserve them so we can display them, which is fantastic. Marilyn and subsequently Helen, I was wondering, sorry, I keep looking to my left because Helen is to my left at the moment, an appropriate distance away. It would be great if you could talk a bit more about the kind of processes the objects went through, which has helped us understand them as well as not only care for them.
Well, you're right. It took many years. Oh, it was over a period, I suppose, of about 10 years, but all in all, probably about 3-6 years to do completely. I left the museum 5 years ago, and my colleague Fleur, who you saw at the photo of Fleur at the start, carried on the work on the cheek pieces, which we hadn't been able to include in the first phase. When we started, as I say, we had no idea how much of this we could get out coherently. The basic body of the cheek pieces and helmet is iron of about 3 millimeters thick, reasonably heavy iron. But of course that was corroded, it was cracked. There were lots of cracks all the way through everything. The ground that had been lying in, obviously been ploughed over the surface at times, it rendered everything very fragile. The silver was extremely papery thin, and that just could break up. You can see the little patches I've had to put on to hold it all together while I got it out of the block. And it was just, you had to do everything in sequence, consolidate it with sort of synthetic resins while you were going to stop it falling apart as you got it out of the block. And then after that, everything, these thousands of pieces had to be gone through, looking at them under a microscope and cleaning, consolidating, joining tiny fragments to make bigger fragments, and then putting the whole thing together. It was challenging, but we were helped by X-rays. Obviously, that's one of the first things we did. One of the first things was to X-ray the enormous block. You couldn't see much at that stage, but you could see coins, and you could see that there was the shape of a helmet in there. But we had no idea we were going to find these cheap pieces. One of the interesting parts was the brow guard, which you see at bottom right there, which was not iron. It's a very elaborate three-dimensional design with a female face in the center there, a bust of a female goddess or empress, we're not sure which. 2 lions on either side, and scrolls and swags, very, very elaborate. But that is extremely thin silver with a packing of sand, basically. It had been a paste originally made with probably pine resin and beeswax to harden it, and very thin silver foil over the top. So to get that out at all was quite a joy, really. Unfortunately, of course, it's very badly damaged while being buried all those hundreds of years, but I think it's still an impressive object. And then once this had gone on display, the work began on the rest of the cheap pieces. And Fleur made up an extra one out of little bits that she found in amongst the soil. So we've now got 7, I think it is, Helen. And we think that there's possibly one to match the big, elaborate emperor cheek piece you saw there, and also another one that actually should go on match the one that fits onto the helmet. So it's quite a long job, but it was well worth it, I think. But there's more work to be done, and I think you're going to go on to that question next.
Yeah, and yeah, so just talking more about the additional cheap piece conservation that took place. I think it was around about 2017, and then February this year. Luckily, just before lockdown, we managed to collect the 5 cheap pieces which we hadn't had back in 2012. So the display you can see behind me was put in 2012. So that was the 2 cheap pieces, one of which has a join with the helmet bowl, so obviously belonged to that bowl, and then the other one is the really well preserved, what we call the Emperor cheap piece. But there were these 5 other cheap pieces which remained at the British Museum, along with lots of other little silver components, silver packages, which Fleur spent many hours trying to work out, did the silver come from the cheap pieces? Just puzzling, really, but she's done some amazing work. I mean, just this slide that you can see at the moment, this is cheap piece 2. So this is one that isn't on display yet, but hopefully in the coming years we will put on display along with the other cheap pieces that have yet to be seen here at Harborough. So you can see a kind of a before and after. So once it's been taken out of the block by Marilyn and Fleur, there was still a hell of a lot of work to do, as you can see here. This is how it looks now on the right hand side. So it has even got, its shine back in certain places. Fleur's done an amazing job to, bring out some of that original shiny surface, which I don't think you actually get on the things here at Harborough Museum at the moment. Those ones haven't had their shine brought out. Obviously, doing that does degrade the surface somewhat. So there's only a certain amount that you can do that. But yeah, so I'm just showing you the image. So this is cheek piece 3, which possibly could be the other matching side to our helmet bowl that we have here at Harborough. So this is the front and back view. I like the back view because it's got a lovely little fastening loop, little bronze fastening loop at the bottom edge, which you can see it's how, you know, the soldier would have tied the cheek pieces underneath his chin to keep his face safe and his helmet on, I suppose, when he's bobbing up and down on his horse. But yeah, there's lots of interesting questions that have come up with this further stage of conservation to the cheek pieces. You know, it's thrown up more questions and more queries to how we, you know, originally interpreted the helmet. There's various theories, and I think some of those have certainly been thrown asunder to a certain extent with some of the analysis that has been happened on these new cheek pieces. Certainly, most of them seem to have the similar design of an emperor riding triumphantly over a vanquished foe, a bearded barbarian, a native Briton perhaps, and the goddess Victory flying behind. And you can kind of see on the cheek pieces that have come back to us recently that it looks to a certain extent like that image of that emperor has possibly been scraped off. The silver that had the emperor, you can still see some of the detail around the edge, but the emperor looks a bit like he's been defaced. That's something that we need to explore further, because that obviously has big impact on how we may interpret, you know, what were the native people thinking when they buried this helmet? Whose side were they on? Were they on anybody's side? You know, what did they think? What did they think of this object that they'd got hold of somehow? How on earth did they get hold of it? So many queries. And there's another cheek piece 4, which again, here's the before and after shot. So the before, you know, it doesn't look very promising, does it? The before, but the after is amazing. And especially when you look at the X-ray of that cheek piece. So you can just about see, I'll see if I can do my laser pointer thing. Bear with me. So you can just see on the X-ray a little man, a bearded man with a strange hat, and he's kind of underneath highlighted in red. So yeah, this seems to have a possibly different iconography to the other cheek pieces. And who's this bearded man? He doesn't look like the bearded men on the other cheek pieces. Although I think some people actually think it might be a lady. I always think it's of it as a bearded man, but anyway, ignore that. This one's definitely a bearded man. And there's been some thoughts that possibly he's this Dacian ruler. He looks a bit like depictions of Decebalus, I hope I'm saying that right, that's modern day Romania, from that area. So that again is more scope to look into there. I'll just show you some of the other bits that have come from the helmet block also. So it's not just the helmet and the cheek pieces, there's lots of these little wonderful tiny very thin bits of silver sheet molded into various designs. We've got 2 kind of lions chasing each other at the top left, and a kind of a knob thing on the other side. Don't know what this is. It just looks, yeah, a bit like a knob with a cross kind of decoration on it. And these folded packages, the image that shows the pen, folded packages of silver. Now what on earth are they? We just don't know at the moment. So yeah, lots and lots to think about and research in the future.
Thank you very much. I should say, if you would like to visit in the future when we are open again, we've actually got a recreation of the soil helmet came out in, which looks fantastic, and it really gives you an idea of just how unlike a helmet it looked whilst it was in the ground. I think it's incredible that it was turned into a helmet we've now got on display. It boggles my mind. We've also got a couple of touch screens which you can use safely when we've reopened. We've got COVID secure measures, and they have got a lot of footage of the conservators actually doing work on the finds. When that took place, they had a webcam set up, and there's other information about the whole treasure project on those touch screens. So I would encourage everybody to come and visit when you can to have a look at those. We've also got a bit of a roving reporter style thing going on, which you may have noticed. Helen, our archaeology manager, is in the gallery with me, but she is mobile. So a couple of times we have focused on some objects as they are displayed in the museum, so you can get a look and see what they look like on display. Thank you very much, Helen, for being our roving reporter. It reminds me of watching Treasure Hunt as a child in the 90s. I'll move on to our next question, something which Hazel touched upon when she was talking about finding everything initially. And again, if you come and visit us, you will see that we have got lots of pig bones on display, and thousands were discovered at Hallaton. We don't have all of them here, so if I could ask Vicki and Helen about where they are now and what.
Well, I think actually, and Helen will correct me if I'm wrong, that most of them are now in storage, archive storage, aren't they, Helen? We've still got a few, I think, left at the university for our animal bone expert, Jen Browning, who did the reports, yeah. So she can keep going back and looking at them, because every now and again people will send us an email saying, oh, you know, I'm really interested in this, can you tell us this? So, you know, so there's still research going on. And the pig bones are really probably one of the most fascinating bits of the site. And I have to admit that when we first did the initial excavations, we didn't really think they were part of the site. Sort of as an archaeologist, you're used to seeing bits of animal bone around, and we kind of thought that maybe they were burials that a local farmer had buried. And it was only when we started clearing the area and we saw just how many of them there were, and that they were scattered. I think Hazel always tends to call them the pig pavement, because that's exactly what it looked like. It was just this massive bones across a large area that we realised they were relevant to the site. And when we actually started excavating them, we quickly realised that we've got two different types of animal bone deposits. We've got the pits, which have got bits of pig portions placed in it. So you'd get like a hind leg or a skull or half a pig. And obviously these had still been articulated when they went in the ground. And we're assuming that they were some kind of sort of deposit, that some kind of offering to a god, that kind of thing. And then over the top of these pits, we got like just a mass of lots and lots of animal bone, which you can see in the image there. And we think that probably that comes from feasting, that the people who are up there were perhaps having this feasting of various sort of portions of pig, and then throwing the bones away. And what's really interesting is that the pig deposits are directly opposite, you can see in the map there, directly opposite where the coins are deposited. And it's almost as if the coins are the offering inside the shrine, whereas the pig bones are the offering outside the shrine. And it makes you wonder whether you've got some kind of class system going on here, where only certain people are allowed inside the shrine to deposit the coins, perhaps leaders, perhaps priests. And then on the outside, you've got the general public, who were perhaps coming up there to meet, sacrifice a pig, place an offering in the ground to a god, and then feast on the rest of the pig and deposit the bones on top. So yeah, they're really interesting. And then of course we've got the bit that everybody finds really fascinating, in that we're missing an awful lot of right front legs. And this kind of only really came out when Jen started doing the bone analysis. But for some reason, we just don't have the right proportion of front legs for the number of pigs we've got up there. What this actually means, we don't know. Whether this means that the right front leg was very important, and therefore somewhere on site there's a huge pile of front legs, whether they were given, as some kind of offering to people, or to gods or whatever, or whether the converse was true, and that they weren't important, therefore they've been discarded. We just don't know. It's a really interesting concept, but it's very definitely the fact that we have got this missing that the right front legs are missing somewhere. I don't know if Helen wants to add anything more to that.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm just getting to grips with my tripod. Yeah, and I find the pig bones fascinating, especially as you may have just got a glimpse into the background here in the Hallaton Treasure Gallery in terms that we've kind of gone with a snowy scene for our interpretation here. I don't know if Vicki just mentioned it then, but the fact that many of the pigs were not fully grown, they were very, immature pigs when they were slaughtered, which is why we kind of think this kind of rituals were happening possibly in the autumn, winter time, just from working out when, the natural age that pigs will be born, and then working along from the age of that they were slaughtered. So that's interesting. They're not reaching their full potential. Is that because it's, it's more of a gesture to kill off a pig in its prime before it's reached its full maturity? It's a real sacrifice. And, that was a real, a good gift for your gods, or showing that you had enough wealth, enough pigs to do this and to get rid of all your potentially huge animals that you were going to rear. And the other objects found with the pig bones as well, the tankard handle and the possible scepter, which you may be able to see in the image here, but I'll put a picture of it up on the screen. So there's a beautiful tankard handle found amongst the pig bones, possibly from an Iron Age wooden built tankard with copper alloy bronze kind of fittings and the handle. And I've brought the replica one along with me here today, just so you can get an idea of how large it is. So again, this is the idea of them feasting and drinking and having a bit of a party. So this is the actual real replica that we had made by a wonderful man called Nodge Nolan, who worked out the circumference of the vessel from the curve on the actual real handle. So you can see it's a whopper. So if people were gathering, drinking beer, mead, whatever they would have had in that period, passing this round, having a lovely joint of pork as well, it's a real party atmosphere. Everybody's drinking out of one of these, but again, it's all communal, sharing amongst the community, people being brought together. So wonderful.
I think that's one of the really nice things about the pig bones and the tankard handle is this idea of feasting, is that it's not just a shrine for like leaders or chieftains to come up here. This is a community area. The number of pigs we found up there suggests that, so like there's quite a large gathering of people all coming together to do whatever they're doing, worshipping their gods, perhaps watching their leaders place coins in the shrine, but then at the same time taking part in this communal feasting and offerings to the gods. So it's not just for the elite, it's also for the whole community.
Thank you very much. Now, I did say we would have questions after we've done all of our discussion points, but there's one relevant one that's come through which I'll put to you all now. This is from Chris Buckley, who has asked, offerings with feasting debris on top, any signs of charred remains from cooking nearby? Now, does that make sense? I've read that out as it's written.
This is something that we haven't found is evidence for cooking. We've got no fires, we've got no hearths or anything like that. However, we have only excavated a relatively small area. There's a whole hilltop of stuff up there, so it could just be that we've missed it. The other interesting thing is that there's not a huge sign of cooking actually on the bones themselves. However, talking to the animal bone experts, what they say is that actually, for example, if things were boiled, you might not get charring or burning, sort of like that shows on the bone itself. And the same with knife marks. If you had skilled butchers, they wouldn't necessarily leave that many marks on the bone.
I think I'm right. Am I right in saying, Vicky, that one of the few places where we found a little bit of charring and darkening of the soil, and also some charcoal, were tiny bits in amongst. It was all mixed up with coins in the helmet block, which is a little bit later than, am I right in thinking that's a little bit later than the other coin deposits?
Yeah, possibly. One of the things we think might have happened with the helmet is that that perhaps, because there's pig bones in with it, that perhaps the pig bones were there first, and that when they've dug the pit to put the helmet in, they've unearthed the pig bones, recognised them as something important, and put them back in with the helmet. You can see there's a on the picture there's a skull, a pig skull sat sort of in with the helmet remains.
Thank you very much. So I shall return to our discussion points that we are going through at the moment. Everybody who's watching, if you do have a question for the panel, please do put it in the chat, make it a comment, or send it to Harborough Museum through Messenger, and if we can get through all of them, we will do our best. The next question is about the South East Leicestershire Treasure Project, which saw the Hallaton Treasure tour the country and finally come to be at home at Harborough Museum. This involved working with a lot of the community and was one of the first projects of its kind. So Vicki, to start with, please could you tell us what made the discovery, excavation, conservation and placement of the Hallaton Treasure unique?
I think just about everything. I mean, from my point of view, working on the Hallaton site, I mean, as I mentioned before, it's the first time I'd met Ken, and it was basically my first involvement with community archaeology, you know, working with local amateur groups, and that's something that's carried on all the way ever since. You know, because this was unlike my normal job, which is developer funded archaeology, you know, this was very much a research based post, and therefore money was limited, and so without the Hallaton Field Work Group providing an awful lot of the work, you know, we wouldn't have been able to do anywhere near as much work as we did on it. And I think from both points of view, it was my first time working with community groups, and I think it was their first time working with professional archaeologists. I think we all learned a great deal from each other, especially sort of like in the first couple of years of working together. And, you know, it's proved a very, very fruitful relationship ever since. We've carried on. We do annual excavations, obviously not this year, but, you know, and we work together ever since then. Academically, we've always had this bit of an initiative, sort of like the East Midlands, sort of like in the past, it's always been seen as a backwater. You know, London and the South East was always really important, and everywhere else a bit on the periphery. And in particular, Leicestershire, with a lot of its heavy clay soils, had always been assumed to be, you know, a little bit of a backwater, not much going on. And I think, you know, this site just absolutely proves what most of us have always thought, that actually that just isn't true. That, you know, you've got this thriving community, that you've got quite a lot going on, and that actually East Leicestershire is obviously a major centre of importance. You know, to have this internationally renowned site there. That obviously brings together people from all over the area.
Could I break in at this point and make it clear that we are not discussing a excavation here, but Vicki and Eulas actually organised and supervised 3 excavations. So this is a 3-year thing, and it didn't just happen in the one season. Thank you, Vicki.
Can I add a bit now? Is it all right? I had rather hoped I might come in on this question and actually prepared for it. I'd like to quote Professor Hazelgrove. Professor Hazelgrove has said that Hallaton is significant not just for the finds, but it is an outstanding example of community archaeology. Hallaton provides a model of how such a project should be undertaken in every respect. And I think Vicki's patience working with us as a community group has a lot to do with that success. So thank you, Vicki.
I think it's
patience.
I think that's it. I think, you know, sort of like what Hazel said is absolutely true. And it's the fact that when Ken found the coins, you know, I mean, we were all used to seeing articles in the newspaper, metal detector finds fantastic treasure. And it's all about the treasure. And you read it and you think, well, that's great. But what was it? Where was it? What was it doing? And in this case, because Ken knew how important it was, and because he went to the right people, we're able to actually, you know, sit down, look at it, and then excavate the site in the right way. And that's given us a story, because otherwise we just have a load of coins, you know. So I think that's what's really important about it, the fact that everybody really worked well together. And it's not just sort of us professional archaeologists and the community, but also the British Museum, the BBC, sort of like all the different, we've had so many different people involved. And then once the excavations were over, you know, it's sort of like it was down to Helen and Leicestershire County Council, you know, to pull it all together and get all the funding for the museum. So, you know, it's been so many different people working together to get this end result.
Thank you. And Marilyn, would you like to add anything at all?
Well, I'd just like to echo everything Vicki was saying there. I mean, I think that's what was so nice about the whole project, apart from the uniqueness of the finds and the importance, the archaeological importance of this site. It's from beginning to end a human story about the site, what was going on there originally, and a human story of the people who found it, and the teams who came together to get all this information out to the world. It was a fantastic experience, actually, because right to the end, I mean, the museum, the British Museum, is sometimes thought of as, you know, up there in the capital or unto itself. But in lots of cases, we have connections out in the country. I'd never worked with anybody from this part of the country before, but this opened up a whole new area for us. And getting together with Helen, Frank, Sarah, everybody at Harborough Museum, with Vicki at university, and Ken and Hazel, it's just been a joy from beginning to end, and has contributed so much to what we're getting out of this site.
Fantastic, thank you. As somebody who wasn't involved in the projects or the process of getting it into the treasure, I would like to say getting it into the museum, I would like to say thank you as well, because it's fantastic having it here, and it's lovely to hear how much of a community effort it was. I realise that we are raring ahead. We're on 2:30. We've got a couple more things to discuss, and then we do have some viewer questions, which is fantastic. So our next question, to particularly Vicki, Ken, and then Helen, is about the Hallaton Treasure being an internationally important Iron Age discovery with the unique Roman cavalry helmet, which we've spoken about. In the 20 years since the treasure's discovery, I meant the treasure's discovery. I do apologise, I'm getting tongue-tied. In the 20 years since the treasure's discovery, extensive conservation has taken place, as we've heard. Vicki has published a book about the treasure, and the Hallaton Field Work Group continues their exciting and important work. Please, could you talk about how Hallaton has changed our understanding of Iron Age Britain, and within that, how our understanding of the treasure has changed over the past 20 years?
Okay, well, you can see there the traditional map of all the different tribes of Britain. And one of the things that has happened is because all of the hordes were excavated in the British Museum, the coin experts were able to identify exactly what coins came from which hoard and where in the hoard they were, etc. And one of the things they realised was that every hoard contained a mixture of the coins. And because we know that all the coins went down in a relatively small period of time, probably, I don't know, about 20, 25 years, what this means is something that's been suspected, but hadn't necessarily been definitely proved, was that rather than having a single tribe with one ruler who ruled over a large area, what we're probably looking at is lots of much smaller sort of groups within the area, each perhaps with their own leader, and those are the names of the people that you can see on the coins. And that what's happening is these groups are all coming together at Hallaton as a community and all mixing their coins together to place them in the ground as an offering. So it's a much more, I think, fluid idea of Iron Age Britain, that you've got these much smaller family groups, which makes a lot of sense, you know, when you think about it, rather than a single tribe with one ruler. And to me, I think that's you know, one of the interesting things about it. This little insight into the social aspect and how something like a coin can actually give you that sort of insight into the social life of the people at the time, and also the fact that you've got their names. You know, the idea that these are names of people that are alive, sort of like potentially 2,000 years ago.
Thank you. Now, I've got a note about Ken talking about something. Is that right, Ken, in connection with this?
I don't think so. I think I'd like to say I find it a little odd that we've got a coin from virtually every Celtic tribe at the time represented on the site. And I would really like someone in the world of academia to actually read Vicki's book and come out with some sort of plausible story as to what, how. We know the when. This has been, I feel, after 20 years, a little bit lacking. Vicki's worked her socks off doing all the digging, presented all this information, and I would like a few people to actually put it together, make a story. It's probably not going to be correct, but I think we need a variety of possible ideas here, because I find most of it totally baffling.
I think one of the things to say is that, you know, so like while there are lots and lots of, or there are quite a few other Iron Age shrines, this particular one is pretty much unique in Britain, and is probably closer to the kind of shrines that you get sort of like abroad on the continent. But just because it's unique doesn't mean that it was the only one. You know, I think there was a certain element of luck played out in how this site was found and how it was subsequently excavated. And I would probably bet, if I was a betting person, that there are other sites like this out there, and that potentially other treasure finds that have been turned over, perhaps just by metal detectorists, but then haven't been excavated, could easily be this kind of shrine. And that we just simply don't have the evidence for it at the moment.
Thank you very much. We're on to our penultimate talking point now. And I think we're now talking about what each of us might have done in connection with Hallaton, but not necessarily directly connected to the treasure. So I'd be interested to hear if any other work has been undertaken in Hallaton over the past 20 years. Do we know if it's always been a special place? Vicki, Ken and Hazel, if you'd like to talk about that, that would be fantastic.
Okay, well, as I said before, this project sort of sparked my my involvement with community archaeology, and since then we've been working not just in Hallaton, sort of, but all over the area. But we've done quite a lot of excavation in Hallaton, and since about 2011, 2012, we've been actually digging a medieval chapel just around the corner from where the treasure site is. Now, that might not immediately sound like it's connected, but actually, this thing, these excavations are actually really interesting, because it kind of presents us with a timeline. So we've got the Iron Age shrine site turned up, and then we found this medieval chapel, St. Morell's Chapel. You can see here a few of the interesting burials that we found on the site. And it turns out that St. Morell's Chapel looks to be some kind of pilgrimage area, and that Hallaton was in the medieval period a place of pilgrimage. There are various other things that suggest this. We've also got a holy well, and it's on the same ridge. When you look at the landscape, it's all on this high ridge that's overlooking the village, and it makes you start to wonder whether the reason that this chapel is there is based on some knowledge that this particular area was perhaps known as a special place. What's even more interesting is that where this chapel is also the starting point for the traditional Hallaton hare pie scramble and bottle kicking, which is one of these strange, there's some images of it there, one of these strange traditions. And again, it starts to make you think, why is all this happening in this place? Is this because this ridge has this, this knowledge of it being a special area, a sacred place? And then we can even push it back slightly further, in that when we did the geophysical survey, we have some features up there that we think might even be older than the Iron Age, potentially a Bronze Age round barrow. You know, so even before the shrine was there, it could have been known as potentially some kind of holy place. You can see there, the top left on that image, that's the digital elevation model of the area with orange, the darker orange there is a higher ground. And you can see that where the treasure site is in St. Morell's Chapel, they're right sort of on the edge, overlooking the valleys. You know, and it does make you wonder that perhaps the whole of this landscape, this ridge, is known, was potentially this special sacred area, a kind of meeting place where people would come together. You know, and I think it's amazing that you can perhaps trace that all the way through to the modern day with the bottle kicking. Sorry, I'm being inundated by cats.
No, it's lockdown life, isn't it?
After we finished on the treasure site, the Hallaton group actually bought themselves some geophysical equipment, and the field that Vicki has been talking about, St. Morell's Chapel, was one of the first areas we tried it out. And what did we find? We found a huge square, 36 meters across, going through the hedge and into the next field. And the one thing apparently that the great and the good, when they go on their summer soirees on the continent talking about the treasure, the first question that they are asked is, where is the shrine? And of course, we don't have a shrine or a temple on the site, as far as we know. However, this big square looked temptingly like a shrine site, a Roman shrine site. So we started digging and found some of it was medieval. But I still think if we dig deep enough, we'll find more Roman underneath there.
Yes, that's Colin Hazelgrove, when he lectures on the continent, they say about the Iron Age, they say, and then where's the Roman temple? So we had hoped we'd found one for him.
Maybe in the future, you never know. Or I shouldn't say that just in case I'm putting promises forward that somebody can't fulfill. On to our final points then, and we've saved perhaps the biggest question for last, which I shall direct towards Helen first. what is next?
Hello, sorry, I was just shifting. So I think I've shown you a few of the new cheap pieces that we took delivery of this year. Obviously, with COVID and everything, we were hoping that we may get some of those on display a bit earlier than probably we're going to now. But yeah, we've got a meeting next week about where we go forward with getting the rest of that material on display at the museum. Marilyn and Fleur did visit us this time last year just to have a look at the helmet, see how it was doing in the display case. Obviously, it had been 8 years since it was stuck back together with lots and lots of glue. And thankfully, Marilyn and Fleur thought it was, it was standing up really well. The conservation was, nothing has ever, not the slightest tiny crumb has ever fallen off, which I'm happy to say. So this has given us a different way of potentially going forward with getting the rest of the cheap pieces on display. So if you can see in the image that I've got on the screen now, that's from our visit that Marilyn and Fleur undertook last year. We actually took one of the cheap pieces, which are, here they're on display at the moment. They're displayed separately because we thought we didn't want to put them at too steep an angle originally because they're very, very fragile. But we think that, they've lasted this long. We think that probably we'll be able to create some kind of mount to actually put them in position on the helmet. So there's a mount maker that we have commissioned to do this, to make to modify the mount that we've got here and put the cheap piece 6, which is this one here, on display, is the one that matches it. So that will be put into place, and then the other one, which we think is the other matching one. So I think that will give people a lot of a better idea of what the helmet would have looked like, and then another case or something to display the rest of the finds. And obviously the interpretation may change as well, looking at what it means that some of the silver seems to have been taken off the surfaces, the fact that we've got 7 cheap pieces, a lot of them with a similar imagery, but this unusual imagery of the possible datation, and does that affect the dating? There's lots more work to be done, and possibly writing an article, getting the helmet out there, and getting some academics, arguing about it, which would be great, because that will give us something, more to go on. I think it's great to get, spark academic debate over it. So that's something for the future. We also recently, I think Hallaton Field Work Group got contacted by a lovely man called Yves Ruteman. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing that incorrectly, who is from Switzerland. And he is the president of Legion 11, which is a Swiss Roman reenactment group. And he, just off his own bat, had a replica of the Hallaton helmet created by a workshop in Serbia, I think, and he just sent us some pictures of him with this wonderful helmet. And it's just incredible just to see it as it would have looked. And he rides a horse, he wears it on a horse, he says it's so comfortable, it doesn't bob around, it's wonderful, and he loves this helmet. So we've had a bit nice email conversation with Eve, and hopefully one day he'll be able to come over, bring the replica, and have a look at the real thing. But that's kind of given us ideas. Potentially, can we get our own replica here, or maybe one to people to try on, one that might be on display? So there's lots more we can do in that sense with the displays, COVID permitting, of course.
Thank you, Helen. Vicky, would you like to talk about any research at all?
Not so much research, but just to say that obviously Hallaton Field Work Group are still excavating. We haven't done anything this year, but last year we actually looked at a little area in between the St Morel's Chapel and the treasure site, which to all intents and purposes we thought is a mill mound. We went in to look at a mill mound, and lo and behold found Roman archaeology. And not just that, but also 2 burials. And at the moment, we don't know what date they are. They could be anything from sort of like Iron Age all the way through to medieval. Obviously, with what's happened this year, we haven't been able to do much more with that. But you know, the intention is to keep on going and to keep on finding more information and keep adding to the story.
Fantastic, thank you. And Ken and Hazel, would you like to add anything about that work that's being undertaken?
Yes, round about the Stonehenge area, they're finding that a large amount of the animal carcasses, skeletons that they're finding, when they've analysed the bones, checked their isotope registers, they're finding that a lot of the, in this case, mainly cattle, but we will be dealing with obviously pigs, are coming from far afield. Some people are even thinking as far as the Orkney. It will be interesting for some of the pig bones that we've got at Hallaton to be tested and see, are they all local pigs, or did people from the various tribes bring pigs with them for the feasting?
And I think I need to give a plug for Hallaton's little museum. This year, of course, with COVID, they haven't been able to make it the 20 years. So next year it'll be 20 years since the first dig. And they are planning their new exhibition around that theme for next year. So that's a treat in store at Hallaton Museum.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much. Well, related to Ken's comment, we do have a comment from Hilary Art and Archaeology, which says, I believe that the late Bronze Age feasting midden in the Vale of Pewsey has 77% right pig limbs. See Chadwick. I assume that is a published article or a book. That's very interesting, and that could be potentially useful, as Ken has said, looking alongside the context of animal remains being found by Stonehenge. We do also have a question from somebody involved in Hallaton Museum, Alexandra Wallace-Hicks, who has asked, was the feasting a one-off or was it an annual event? And I'm going to open that to everybody.
Okay, well, shall I start? I think it's very much an annual event. I don't like, as Helen said, the age of the pigs when they were killed suggests it happened in the autumn winter. And there's such a large deposit of bones there that I think it's something that's built up over a period of time. I think, yeah, we've got 13 known coin hoards. So we're thinking that perhaps this is an annual event over a period of you know, sort of maybe 15, 20 years. I don't know if anybody else has got anything else to add to that.
Definitely annual, knowing Hallaton, they wouldn't give up after 1 year.
I guess the interesting thing is we don't know exactly when these 15, 20 years were happening, but it's sometime around the period of the Roman invasion. And it's you know, is this a direct response to that event, either, you know, sort of like people feeling the pressures or the you know, the knowledge of people coming into their country, their territory, and this is a direct response to that.
Was the one tankard enough for Hallaton?
That's fantastic, thank you. We've got another question from Graham Appleby. I'll open this to everybody again, but I think Marilyn might know the answer to this one. It's a question about the helmet. Was there any evidence for a liner or preserved textile?
No evidence. No, we looked very, very carefully for that. There was no textile traces we could find at all, and we had FTIR analysis done on certain samples, but the inside of the helmet itself was carefully looked at microscopically, and we never were able to find any sort of organic or lining material. So whether I would imagine you would have had to have some sort of perhaps leather liner on something like this, on a helmet. But perhaps that had been separated from the helmet earlier. Perhaps a sort of cap affair is a separate thing. Either way, there seemed to be no traces in the block itself in the context.
I think this is one of the interesting things about the helmet, is sort of like going back to why is it there? And, you know, when we first started, I think the original idea was that perhaps this helmet had been given as a diplomatic gift from the Romans to a local tribe that they wanted to keep sweet as they sort of like marched through. And that idea, I think, has become more and more unlikely when we realise that actually we've not got a helmet, a complete helmet. What we've got is sort of essentially bits of lots of different helmets, as well as other things. So that's kind of turned it on its head a bit, and we're now sort of trying to get to grips with that and work out, what is it? Is it, one of the suggestions that's been put forward, and perhaps Marilyn might know a little bit more about this, is that perhaps this was these fragments of helmet were here to provide repairs to other helmets. Perhaps it's some kind of workshop, sort of like, and that it's somehow fallen into the hands of the local Iron Age tribe. But, the original idea that this was a single helmet that was given in a complete form, that was given as a diplomatic gift, I think through Marilyn's work, I think that's probably not the most likely explanation anymore.
Yes, I think that's probably right. At first, I thought the same, Vicky, that perhaps these were materials that someone was keeping for repairs, running repairs, that sort of thing. I'm not sure about that. We'll never know. But and some of the silver sheet, for instance, the packages, that is obviously taken from something else and folded up very carefully. It's quite thin. It's not quite like the silver that you find on the helmet itself. We've X-rated, had a very close look. We can't see any design or anything, even flattened out design on that. So that you tend to think, well, maybe that's material being kept back for some other purpose. But this is where future work might be useful. We don't really know, but apart from the fact that it's not a complete helmet that's been given as a gift, I don't think.
Yeah,
the cheek pieces themselves that belong to the helmet look as though they've been torn off. So it's sort of been roughly dismantled before being put in the ground, I think.
Yeah, you can just see on the slide I've just put on the screen, you can see on cheek piece 3, there is a bent pin at the top. So the hinge pin that would hinge it onto the helmet bowl, you can kind of see at the top has been bent as if it may have been yanked off the bowl. And I think there was some suggestion with some of the work that Fleur did on the cheek pieces that where the silver had been taken off the surface, there were kind of evidence that the cheek pieces had gone into the ground with the silver taken off. It's not obviously some of it is due to decay, but that the silver wasn't there when it was in the ground, kind of thing. That had happened before deposition, kind of, in effect. So yeah, that's an interesting aspect of it as well.
I think the idea of the diplomatic gift sort of like pointed towards the Curator being kind of almost pro-Roman, whereas now with the emperor being scratched off and sort of like cheek pieces being ripped from the bowl, it kind of suggests the opposite. So you can see how little things and sort of like a little bit of research can completely change our view.
Thank you very much. That's a very comprehensive answer. Graham Appleby has said thank you as well. We've also got another message from Hilary Art and Archaeology, which says, The thing she was referencing was Madgwick, which is a presentation at Oxford Continuing Education Department from 2018 entitled Settlement and Landscape in LBA Britain. Thank you very much for that. So we've got one last question, which I shall put to everybody again. If people would like to ask a question afterwards, what we're going to do is put up a slide with people's contact details, so you can get in touch with me and Helen, Vicki. We've put the details of the Hallaton Field Work Group as well. So our final question is from Char, and I should have asked this one first because it's the first one we got, but I've been naughty and saved it till the end. They have asked, I wondered if the gateway where most of the artifacts were found was a real gateway or a symbolic one, i.e., is there any evidence of a real barrier stretching off in either direction between two?
Okay, well, this is a really interesting one because something we haven't really mentioned, but you can see quite clearly on the that little plan there, is that the entranceway where most of the coins were found, it's kind of got this little turnstile effect. So there's a little ditch in the middle, which was where the dog was found, sort of guarding the coins, and you can see you could see there a sort of reconstruction of what we think the entranceway would have looked like. There's some suggestion that it was a palisade. In that it's very steep-sided, so it could have been a physical barrier. But a lot of the time in sort of the Iron Age and the prehistoric periods, things like ditches were fairly symbolic. The suggestion that it could be either side of tribal land, I'm not sure about. I just don't think we have enough evidence to say one way or another, anything like that. But I think it was very definitely a symbolic barrier, and I think there are suggestions that it was also a sort of physical barrier as well. I don't know if Helen's got anything to add to that.
Yeah, sorry, we've not really talked about the dogs, so I'll just, and that does link into the boundary. So there were the remains of 3 dogs found at the shrine. This is dog number 2. So this one was found right in the slot in the entranceway, which possibly acted a bit of an in-out turnstile kind of effect. So, and beneath this dog were the remains of we assume earlier dog, similar build, large dog, and then I think there was some kind of other limb bones found in a slightly different part of the ditch of another dog. All seem quite old, large dogs. So you know, the interpretation of them possibly as guard dogs of the boundary into the shrine, assuming it's an in and an out kind of way of looking at it. So yeah, definitely, I think, you know, they're guarding, and especially this one, it looked like it had been purposefully killed. The way it was buried in the ground, the head has been pulled back, and it's kind of looking in the direction of where the coin hoards were found. So, you know, this dog, maybe it was a great honor for this dog to be, you know, given this job to do forevermore, guarding the shrine and all the offerings that were placed there. So yeah, and we do have the dog on display here. There's the picture of the bones now on display, and it is now at the entrance of the Hallaton Treasure Gallery. So that's quite nice. It's still protecting and looking towards the coins, even 2,000 years later. And this is a possible reconstruction of what the dog may have looked like. So quite a large dog, a guard dog, maybe a sheep dog. I don't know, pig dog. But yeah, we assume, you know, a valued member of that community. So yeah, and that definitely fits in with the boundary kind of idea.
I mean, we should mention as well that, like, the bowl and the glass eyes and the ingots, they all came from the boundary as well. You know, they were all buried within the boundary, and the helmet, although not actually in the boundary, was buried kind of just right on the edge of it. So, you know, everything seems to be linked to the boundary that runs all the way through from the site. I should say we don't actually know whether this was a boundary that basically enclosed the top of the hill all the way round, or whether it was almost just a screen, or just a you know, just sort of that of just that particular bit. But I think you can see the entranceway there. I think it definitely acts as some kind of barrier to people being able to freely go in and out of the site. Within the shrine itself, we didn't actually find much other than the coins, but that doesn't mean that there weren't natural things there, like trees as shown in that kind of reconstruction.
Fantastic. Well, thank you everybody for their questions, and thank you everybody for taking part. I think we will stop there. As I said, if anybody does have any other questions, we shall put on some details so you can take down our contact details. I've also said throughout this stream, you can come and visit the museum once we reopen it. So do keep an eye on our website, which is www.harboroughmuseum.org.uk. We do also have an online exhibition about the Hallaton Treasure currently on the front page there, and there is a subsection called the Hallaton Treasure. So whilst you might not be able to visit us at the moment, or if you aren't able to travel to the UK, you can learn all about it there, and we'll be adding more stuff as we learn and as we develop our plans to put the additional cheek pieces on display. As you can see, we've got our details on the screen there. I very much encourage you to get in touch with the Field Work Group if you want to get into archaeology. Obviously, it might be a bit difficult at the moment, but in the future, hopefully that shall become more realistic again. And again, the plug for Hallaton Museum, a fantastic little museum. I'd also encourage you to have a look at what the University of Leicester Archaeological Services has been up to. I know Helen has been in discussion with some people from ULAS about some interesting finds and a book that might be coming out potentially in the future, so do keep an eye out there. I am just going to permanently unmute myself because I'm doing a bit of a balancing act at the moment, because I would like to say thank you to our panel members. Thank you very much to Vicki, Marilyn, Ken, Hazel and Helen. And I'm sure everybody, if we were doing this physically, we would have a lovely round of applause from everybody watching. So I should do a round of applause for everybody. It's been really fantastic having you all. It's been fantastic having everybody viewing and asking us questions. Thank you to all of you for tuning in. This should be available on our Facebook page after the broadcast ended, so do share it with people. And if you can't visit us in person, visit our website, get in touch. Please send me lots of questions. We've got the Hallaton Treasure, but we've got lots of lovely, fantastic local history collections as well. I could keep babbling forever, so I'm just going to say thank you very much, and I shall hopefully see you all online soon. Goodbye.